the notice and summons the meeting and the attendance and apologies.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be a hybrid meeting to be conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber, Tuesday, 6th of September at 4 o'clock. Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Devaney.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Thompson. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor John Boyle.
Good afternoon, here.
Councillor Donnelly.
Anshaw.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Fleming.
Sure, John.
Councillor Heaney.
Sure, John.
Councillor McGinley.
And Shaw John.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor Mooney.
Here, John.
And Councillor Tierney. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Moving us on to item 3, which is the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website. And item 4 is the declarations of members' interests. They can be declared now or throughout the meeting at any stage. For item 5, I don't have any items that have been raised under chairperson's business. So we'll move ahead to item 6, which is the matters arising from last month's meeting. Councillor Heaney.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just want to ask a question under GSP 119/22. And before I get to the question, just that would be remiss of me, not as our first meeting back, to mention the absolutely devastating hike in gas prices that's been announced today. It will directly impact on the city and the ratepayers of it, and particularly those on lowest incomes who have had gas foisted upon them and housing executive properties. This is just absolutely devastating news, and it's going to, I don't know how people are going to cope with such a huge rise if they can cope at all. And it's long past time that the British government needs to act in relation to windfall taxes on these energy companies and do something to assist people at this sort of desperate time. So the question really is on the Hardship Fund, obviously, and that item of it. And no, I realise it's in the scale of this here, it's a fairly small sum of money, and it's not really going to assist greatly. But anything at all at this time would be welcome by those who could receive it. So, and it's obviously needed now more than ever, along with the proper measures that I mentioned before. So it was really to ask the officers for an update on that and how that's and when is that likely to be delivered. I am aware that there's a reluctance in the community and voluntary sector to take on that particular role, given the scale that it would be, even with the sum of money. Just so, assuming it'll be down to council to do that. So I'm just asking for an update given the news today.
Thank you, Councillor Heaney, for your question. And you'll see that there's a paper in for information. Just to give an update on where we're currently at with the Hardship Fund, we have a further meeting of the all-party working group, which is taking place this Thursday, and we've made some progress in terms of some of the key issues that had been raised at our last meeting, which was around the eligibility criteria and the application process, and we're able to share that information now on Thursday, with hopefully members coming to a conclusion in relation to that, with a further paper then going back to committee. So if I'm happy, if you wanted to go through the paper for information, because we've provided quite a bit of detail in terms of some of the discussions that have taken place, and particularly around the fact that there's now a new initiative coming forward within the community and voluntary sector for the Fuel Bank Foundation, which hopefully are going to run a fuel emergency programme within the council area. And we're looking to see how we can actually build upon that, and that will be part of Thursday's discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair. And just following on from Councillor Heaney's remarks regarding the bombshell that we witnessed today regarding the 56% increase in furnace prices across our council area, which are going to come into effect on the 3rd of October. And that isn't the first price increase this year. In February, we were burdened with 33%. In May, there was another 16%, and now we have this 56%. So in the last 9 months, gas prices in Derry have increased by 140%, which is completely unsustainable, completely unaffordable for normal working families. And we've had limited support from Westminster. We've had no support from Stormont, and the DUP should hang their heads in shame. Their boycott of the Assembly is preventing money getting into people's pockets, people that need support to heat their homes. And people are literally going to be afraid to turn the heat on in their own home. They won't be able to afford it. So this is a catastrophe that is coming down the tracks. And I know that we don't have an executive. I know that we have caretaker ministers in place, but they can't agree anything without an executive. So I've got a proposal. I know we can't write to the DUP to ask them to return to the executive because we've tabled that on so many occasions. But I've got a proposal that we write to Jane Brady, the head of the civil service, asking her to immediately convene a cost of living task force. So I don't have that written down, but it's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
You've seconded that. Councillor Tierney seconded that proposal. I don't see anybody speaking against it, so.
Sure. Sorry, through you, Chair, I'm just checking with Nuala. If you picked that up, okay, Nuala? I'll just give her a moment, Chair. We're just going to contact her through the phone here.
Yep. So Councillor Farrell's proposal is on the screen there, folks, and Councillor Tierney has seconded it. Councillor Fleming, were you looking to come on that?
Thank you, Chair. Just to formally, on behalf of Sinn Féin, they support Councillor Farrell's proposal, and they also we would be of the same view in the sense that if at any time it was needed, it's needed now in terms of a functioning assembly and a functioning executive, and certainly, as we've already called in the past, the DUP do need to get back into Stormont. We try and, to the best of our ability, alleviate the worst excesses of what's befallen people at this particular time. So support the proposal.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else looking to speak on it, and as it's been proposed and seconded, that's passed, folks.
Okay.
And is there any other matters arising just before we move on from last month's, or not last month's, from July's meeting? No. Okay. So that'll move us on to item 7, which is,
Was the minutes?
sorry, that's my,
Sorry.
we've had a month away from it. So we just need a proposer and seconder for accuracy for the minutes. Councillor Mooney and Councillor Heaney. Okay. So that moves us on then to item 7, which is the Q1 financial outturn. It's pages 23 to 34 in the pack, and I'll hand over to Alfie for that.
Thank you, Chair. Members, item 7 is for you to consider and approve our 3-month financial outturn and position at 30th of June 2022. You'll recall the rates process for the year ended 31st of March 23, which approved an overall net expenditure budget after income from services and grants of 67.96 million, and that's set out in the table in section 2.1 for your information. It's obviously important, members, that you're provided with regular financial updates in relation to that, in particular if there are any significant financial issues or pressures arising, and this report provides the position after 3 months. You'll be well aware, members, the financial environment is obviously incredibly challenging at the minute, with a range of ongoing and new challenges, including the pandemic, global cost of living pressures and inflation, construction inflation, the impact of recent local pay negotiations for 21-22, as well as the ongoing national pay negotiations for 22-23. And in addition, running alongside all that, we're monitoring very carefully the impact of all those factors on our rate base, which obviously is a very key component of funding our services, including the impact of ongoing non-domestic revaluation appeals. So, members, the detailed outturn report for Q1 is attached in Appendix 1 for each of the range of service areas across Council, and it's summarised in Section 3.1. So it's not surprising, given the issues just highlighted, that we would be reporting a 1.736 million overspend in the event that we didn't have any contingency reserves in place, which thankfully we do. So just focusing on the key components of that 1.736 million initially before moving on to the reserves that we have in place to offset that. So the first key issue is our services are overspent by 231k. Key issues there are, whilst our planning and building control income is, I suppose, ahead of budget, our leisure income is still significantly behind budget, and we are in the temporary situation where we can offset that from DFC financial losses funding. The environment section continues to face significant challenges as a result of additional staffing pressures in refuse collection, cemeteries and grounds maintenance, as well as additional surcharges imposed on waste contracts due to inflationary increases. Fuel and utility costs are over budget, and it's expected in Q2 to Q4 as usage increases that those figures will increase fairly significantly. And against those issues, we have some savings which have been realised in our support services due to travel and overhead savings and some vacant posts. So that's the first key issue. The second key issue is our other costs. I suppose that's the biggest issue. We have 1.505 million of unbudgeted expenditure there. A small element of that relates to additional expenditure alongside the pandemic, including health and safety costs, additional cleaning costs, security costs, vehicle hire costs, and again, those will be recoverable in the interim from DFC COVID financial losses funding. The key issue there is the pay pressures which are associated with the recent local pay dispute negotiations, and also the likely outcome of 22-23 pay negotiations, for which we had only budgeted 2.5%. So there's a table set out in the report showing the impact of that, and at Q1 that's a 1.35 million impact, but will obviously increase between now and the end of the year. The third issue, thankfully, has been offset. At this point in time, our rates income is 226k behind what we budgeted, due primarily to revaluation appeals, but thankfully, as you'll be aware, we have made recurrent provision within our rates of 400k for that, and we also have a rates appeals reserve, given the fact that 10% of our non-domestic rate base still remains under appeal, and also that the fact that if appeals can be backdated to April 2020, which can be quite significant in some cases. And finally, rate support grant. Again, we're aware the baseline grant has been reduced by 25% in 21-22. Currently don't have an allocation for this year yet. We have an amount in reserve to cover a potential cut, but that's unknown at this point, so therefore we're not reporting any issue on that at the minute, but it's obviously important that it's resolved as soon as possible. So members, as I mentioned at the start, thankfully these issues have been fully mitigated for 22-23 because we do have contingency reserves in place. We have our own financial commitments and contingencies reserve, which we've earmarked a number of pressures against. We have money brought forward from DFC COVID financial losses funding, which obviously has to be focused on losses associated with COVID, and we have made reallocation of our capital budget recently to fund the pressures associated with the pay negotiations. So that would effectively using 1.8 million of those reserves at this point would put us into a very small surplus position, and obviously we'll need more of those reserves as the year progresses. Despite that, members, obviously those are recurrent pressures, so whilst we can fund them for this financial year, they will present a very challenging picture for our 23-24 rates process. Those pressures that I've mentioned are on top of the normal rates planning challenges that we have, such as pay award forecasts, employer pension pressures, other statutory pressures, as well as our growth aspirations. And you will be aware that the Finance Working Group members will be starting to meet from next week for members to examine all budgets in detail and review all savings opportunities in advance of striking the rate in February. So members, that's the key issues, and it's recommended that you approve the Q1 financial outturn position and the associated issues set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alfie. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me on, and I hope you and other members had a pleasant summer. As always, we're always very grateful for Alfie's reports with regards to our financial health, and it's good to see that we are in a better position in terms of the mitigations than what we had previously thought. Whilst Alfie mentioned the need for example, reserves going forward to deal with recurring issues, it would be my position that, and whilst I can't make a proposal as not a member of this committee, I would ask maybe that someone else do it for me, is that the £145,000 surplus that we have is transferred to our Hardship Fund, because there is, whilst we have pressures in this council, the pressures that are going to be felt and are being felt by constituents up and down this city and district are going to be frightening for many over the next couple of months. So whilst, as I say, Chair, not a member, but if another member of this committee would, on my behalf, propose, and I see Gary Donnelly, thank you, Gary, has done that, that we add the £145,000 to the current 308, which would leave us, I believe, at around £453,000 in our Hardship Fund. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alfie.
Councillor Fleming has indicated to come in. If I can get that put into writing so Nuala has a chance to put it up, I'm going to let Councillor Fleming come on ahead, and then we can discuss the proposal when it's on the screen. Thanks.
Thanking you, Chair, and again, thanks to Alfie for a very detailed report, and thanks to Alfie and his team for obviously the work that would have went into putting before us all the detail. And obviously, while there is some signs of recovery in terms of the effects of COVID on our services and our delivery, there's obviously still major challenges ahead, not just the council, but as we know, to the people out there that we represent. And again, and it has already been mentioned in the last item by Councillor Farrell, I mean, while we have had support and welcome the support we've had from DFC, without a functioning executive up, then our hands are tied behind our back in a lot of ways in terms of to try and bring money directly back into people's pockets here and in other parts of the north. So once again, we do need a working executive. Our finance group meets next week in terms of looking at all of the different aspects, both within this report and the wider implications. I would respectfully suggest that was maybe where Councillor Doyle's proposal goes, or it comes forward to full council, because it will have implications for the rate setting process, and I would actually appeal to us all in terms of both in terms of the finance working group and the rates process, that we obviously work together to try and ensure the best outcomes for the people that we serve. And I just think the proposal, while on the surface, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I would like to hear in terms of what the implications may or may not be, and to do that a bit more time, or being brought forward as a proposal to full council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Alfie for, again, another very detailed report. There's no doubt that this council, like every other organisation, home and family across the north, has struggled and grappled with budgets, and thankfully are in a position where we do have reserves built up and we're able to plug that gap. But those reserves, unfortunately, will not last forever, and that's something I think that we have to bear in mind. Councillor Doyle's proposal, whilst it talks about surplus, it's not actually a surplus. We are over budget by 1.7 million. It's not a surplus at all. We are trying to plug a gap in our budgets. We will most likely, and again, and I've said this before, I'm no Alfie Dallas, but we will most likely be in a similar position this time next year, and probably for a number of years after that. I fully appreciate the sentiment of what it is that Councillor Doyle is looking to do, and I genuinely and sincerely wish that we could do more to help people. There's currently £308,000 within the Hardship Fund. There's money to come out of that for the shortfall in advice services. And I genuinely do wish that we had more we could do. We've already spoken about the increase from Firmus gas today. But the reality is that people need support from central government. That's where the responsibility lies. And Councillor Farrell has already put a proposal down to try and get some sort of help out to people. We are not against the proposal, but we would like to see the impact that the proposal may have for council finances and how that will roll out. We will be attending and fully participating in the financial work group, and I think that that's where a discussion like this should be had, because again, it's another opportunity where such a large sum of money has been bunched without any consideration about the wider impact that might have. Whilst we're not fully committed or against it, we would like to see more detail on the rollout of it and the impact that it'll have. So we would be supportive of Councillor Fleming's suggestion that it either comes back to full council or is discussed at the financial working group in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And like the previous two speakers, I understand the sentiment of the proposal being made here at the moment around the 145k. But look, I'm very much aware that the finance working group is meeting next week, and our party would be of the same stance that look, we would need to discuss and around that finance working group the implications of this money going to the hardship funds, and we're all aware of the rates that we'll soon be looking at for the next year. But just to put on record our thanks to Alfie and the team for the piece of work that they've done. But Chair, we will be supporting that this goes forward to and discussed at the finance working group, and then wherever it goes then after that, because we want to get into nuts and bolts in detail, because we always talk about spending money in this council and where it should be spent. Let's get this through the new finance working group, which we will be participating in as well. But that will be our take on it, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Donnelly.
Good Chair, and thanks for letting me in. It's my understanding that there's a proposal now on the floor here or on the table, and it's been seconded. Look, what's effectively happening here is these energy companies have people over a barrel, and they're just shafting people, and in effect they will be killing people. People will lose their lives. This is a devastating announcement today. And I have little love for Westminster, and possibly even less for the what we call Stormont. But the reality is that we need action, and they defer this. It will have to go to full council anyway, and we can discuss this. This will need to be ratified at full council. But what we need is action. And if we don't, and so we should be using every penny we have to get it out to people, in order to get them through this crisis, this cost of living crisis. And I would encourage people to vote for this today, because what people out there will see is that we're in danger of looking like a sketch out of the life of Brian. Well, let's sit down and have a discussion about this, or let's set up a task group. They need action, and they need help at this minute. So I would encourage people to vote for this proposal, and it can be discussed at full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. You are right. There is a proposal on the table. It has been seconded. It will go to a vote after everybody that's indicated that they want to speak has spoke on it. Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just in line of what a number of previous speakers had said and suggested, and the rationale for it in relation to scoping out clearly what the implications of this would be, and the fact that there is a financial working group there, I just propose an amendment to it that reflects that fact, that this be taken into the financial working group for discussion.
And I would second that, Chair.
Councillor Mooney had just indicated in front of you there, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Heaney, whereabouts do you want the amendment put on, just for Milla's sake, to be able to put it on the screen?
I'm relaxed about the position of it. It's just wherever is most appropriate, whether it's at the outset of it or at the end of it.
Okay. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I concur with everything that Councillor Doyle and Gary has just said. It's okay saving money for a rainy day, but our rainy day is here, and it's incumbent on us now to do everything we can to alleviate the hardships facing those in our district. We live in the immediacy, and it's a bad place at the minute. We need to react accordingly and without delay. So I would ask again everyone to support the original motion. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. And just to agree with previous speakers, not the last few, but we need to sit down and consider, and we don't need to navel gaze too much on this. I agree with Councillor Donnelly on that, but proper consideration of how the surplus will be dealt with. We must also be mindful that we owe as services to a wide population of electors throughout our area, and that cannot be compromised either. Thank you, Mayor, Chair.
Thanks, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. Look, I understand where some of the members are coming from with regards to the proposal that Gary has put forward on my behalf. But look, I don't know off the top of my head when the financial working group motion was put to council, but I believe, and maybe I'm mistaken, that it was just prior to recess that the same committee also extended money to the Hardship Fund via a report, and there was no discussion of that then. Look, I know everybody sitting in that room today and everybody who's a member here understands that people are under pressure, but I couldn't have put it better myself when Gary said people need action. There are literally people out there at the moment who are looking at us and at Stormont, whose MLAs are still being paid their full wage, and asking, what are you doing about it? And I don't know how I could go to any of those people today and say, we've deferred this to a working group. People would be sitting in their house laughing at us. That is not what we are supposed to be here to do. And I understand we have got recurring pressures. We all understand that. But think of the pressures that the people who we serve in many of the areas that we represent are facing. If you can genuinely go out today from this meeting and say to people with no problem and a straight face, we deferred it to a working group when people are sitting in the house terrified of what is coming down the road after today's announcement and many others, then fair play to you. But I certainly can't. And there's, again, not a member of committee and have no vote. But we have to show decisive action. Today is the day to do it. And I would hope that people would support this as it is, and we can have a full discussion at full council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm just giving Nuala a wee chance to put the amendment up and we'll vote on that and then on whatever the substantive proposal ends up being. With all due respect to Councillor Doyle and your comments, this proposal won't be passed until full council anyway. So whether that's after the financial working group or whether it's after this committee, it's going to be the end of the month before decisive action is taken. So it's just to make that point, but we'll let Nuala get this on the screen and then we'll go to a vote with the members of the committee. Councillor Heaney, happy enough with the placement of that amendment? Aye. And we'll take that to a vote, John, if that's okay.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Should we be voting on a proposal which in my view is factually incorrect because this isn't a surplus? That £145,000 isn't a surplus. It's from reserves, and it's the shortfall in the budget. And in my view, it's not a surplus. A surplus makes it sound and comes across as if it's extra money. It's not. It is my view that it's not factually correct to say that that amount of money that is referenced in that report is a surplus. And I would, before we vote on it, would like an opinion on whether or not we can do that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I mean, it is very fine in terms of its definition. I think in strict accounting terms, it probably is a surplus in terms of strict accountancy language. The reality of the situation is that we have ended the Q1 period, the first 3 months of this year, overspent by 1.7 million. In strict accounting terms, I think it's the correct terminology, but in layperson's language, we are overspent. Now, we have made provision for that potential overspend. Members have considered and anticipated that overspend, and there has been provision made within various pots of reserves to ensure that we didn't end up in negative financial territory. But that's the current situation. Alfie, do you want to add to that in any way? Chair, would you wish me to proceed with a vote on that?
Yeah, on the amendment.
The amendment. Alderman Breslin?
For.
Alderman Devaney?
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr?
Against.
Councillor John Boyle?
For.
Councillor Donnelly?
Against.
Councillor Farrell?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For, John.
Councillor Heaney?
For.
Councillor McGinley?
For.
Councillor Mooney?
For.
And Councillor Tierney?
For.
Are there any other members of committee that I haven't included there?
Derek here
Alderman Hussey?
for the amended proposal.
Councillor McKee. For.
Thank you, Councillor McKee.
Alderman.
Is
Alderman
that Alderman Thompson?
Thompson, for.
Thank you. Chair, I've recorded 12 for the amendment and 2 against the amendment, so the amendment passes.
Thank you, John. And if we can move to a vote on the substantive proposal, if anybody wants to.
Chair. Alderman Breslin?
For.
Alderman Devaney?
For.
Alderman Hussey?
For.
Alderman Thompson?
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr?
For.
Councillor John Boyle? Councillor Donnelly?
That was a for. Sorry, John, I couldn't get that.
Councillor Farrell?
For.
Councillor Fleming? Councillor Heaney?
For.
Councillor McGinley?
For.
Councillor McHugh? Councillor McHugh?
For, John.
Councillor Mooney?
For.
Councillor Tierney?
For.
Chair, that's unanimous. A vote of 14 for the substantive motion.
Thank you, John. And was there anybody else that wanted to comment on item 7 as the report before we go to proposer and seconder for the recommendations? So if we could have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations, Councillor Fleming and Councillor Heaney. Thank you. Okay.
Have you moved on from that report?
Sort of.
Did you have something else you wanted to ask, or?
Yeah, I just.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Apologies. Just in relation to some of the information within the report, it outlines some of the measures that we had to put in place due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which are still currently in place. And we would appreciate a report back in terms of how long we see those measures being in place. For example, I was at Pennyburn Recycling Centre this morning. There's still security there, but there doesn't look to be a build-up of traffic. Social distancing isn't as big a thing anymore. So just things like that, Alfie, all of the restrictions and all of the measures that we put in place to meet the restrictions that are still in place, can we have a report back on how long we see them running on and how much they're costing council at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, just to say that we will of course do that. Most of those measures are currently being ramped down. Last remaining few still to be done. All of them at this moment in time are still funded through the DFC COVID fund and are not coming out of council finances. Yeah.
Happy enough then? Are we happy enough to move on to the next item? Aye. Okay, so item 8 is the annual performance report for 21-22, and I'll pass over to Ellen for that.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to invite members' consideration and approval of the draft annual performance report for the year 21-22, and that is attached as Appendix 1. Members are sort of reminded that under Part 12 of the Performance Improvement section of the Local Government Act 2014, the Council is required annually to assess its performance in terms of its improvement, in terms of how it's done in terms of its improvement objectives and against statutory indicators and standards. It's also required to produce a report annually by the 30th of September each year. Accordingly, as I say, the annual performance report set out in the document sets out how we've performed with regard to our improvement objectives or financial performance or corporate plan objectives, performance improvement areas and statutory indicators. The report highlights the significant work that the Council has taken forward in 21-22 and delivering its missions and objectives. And I would note that the Council continued to deliver the majority of its services, providing innovative solutions as necessary, and demonstrated its adaptability through realigning resources to meet the needs of its stakeholders. And again, similarly in the context of COVID, while service areas such as leisure service continue to be adversely affected by COVID, demand for many services is recovering and in some areas exceeded pre-COVID levels. In overall terms, the report concludes that recovery is continuing and there has been evidence of improvement on the 2021 year. The report also acknowledges that the Council developed and rolled out a dynamic recovery plan and continued to take proactive leadership within the 21-22 year in dealing with COVID, and in terms of its ongoing commitment, this is reflected in its decision to mainstream ongoing recovery within the normal business processes. Accordingly, in terms of the recommendation, members, subject to your comments, we seek approval for the publication of this annual performance report as set out. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. And any members wish to speak to this item?
I'll propose the item, Chair. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, it's a very detailed report and it clearly details, the raft of achievements and successes that, this council has delivered over the past year in extremely challenging environment. But I've got two questions about, two specific aspects where we're not hitting the target. The first one is about the processing time for major planning applications. The target is that they should be delivered, or a decision in planning should be made within 30 weeks. And the current performance is 51 weeks, so it's nearly a year. And that obviously impacts economic development across the city and district, housing waiting lists across the city and district. And the other key issue for us was about, public perception of high street cleanliness. The target is 85% satisfaction, and we're currently hitting 51%. So I'd like to get a flavour of what we're doing to increase that, because in terms of high street cleanliness, that's one of our key functions where we keep the city and district clean, presentable, and it injects, a sense of public pride in our city and the towns. So I'd like to understand what we can do to improve that. And in terms of the planning applications, I know that as multifaceted, there could be in-house issues, there could be external factors in terms of statutory responses. So I'd like to get a flavour in terms of what are we doing to fix those. Thank you. But happy to second the item.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Doyle. He's the only allowed to get speaker at this point, and then I'll bring yourselves in. Councillor Doyle.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, no, I was interested just on the same, on that item, but with relation to capital projects, I haven't got the page written down here, unfortunately, but I see no mention of, it's in relation to design milestones for capital projects. I see no mention of Templemore Sports Complex. I know obviously that we are at differing stages when it comes to the overall process of that, but I was surprised that it wasn't in there. The other thing that jumped out at me, Chair, and maybe this is just one of those things, but zero number of civil partnerships in the last year. Do we know why that is, or maybe there isn't an explanation for it, but I just thought that was interesting. But in terms of the major planning applications, I note that the former Minister for Infrastructure, in fairness, had done a report around statutory consultees and the time it took for responses from them. But obviously it's something that affects all council areas, but certainly for us to miss our targets by that substantial amount definitely requires explanation. Thank you.
Okay, let's pass over to Ellen or John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll maybe pick up on a couple of those. I maybe missed Councillor Doyle's last point, but in relation to the first point, the processing of major planning applications, probably too big a subject for me to get into today, Councillor Farrell. We have a planning working group set up for next week. The discussion in the planning working group is how we take forward a further improvement plan with regard to all aspects of planning, with the processing of major planning applications being a key part of that. So we'll pick that up with members through the planning working group again next week. But it's a very important matter, and I entirely concur with your sentiment on that. But it's a complex matter requiring a multifaceted approach to it. The High Street cleanliness figure, I think we were very surprised at that figure. That is certainly not the anecdotal evidence of what we're hearing from ratepayers, businesses and visitors. The cleanliness of the city and district is actually being consistently and repeatedly complimented by residents, visitors and citizens alike. So we're going to look into that figure and try to get some handle on why it's so low. That's, by the way, not to say we aren't always trying to improve. But it's certainly something that this council, you as members, we as officers have put a great deal of attention into, the presentation of the city and district. So we are very surprised by that figure, and we'll look into it and bring back further information with regard to that. The question on Templemore Sports Complex remains, as members know, a key, very necessary strategic project for this council, and members are aware of previous reports, both into this committee and a capital working group, where the project is paused pending discussion and resolution of a funding strategy to bring it forward. So the preliminary design work has all been undertaken. The cost is known. The scale, shape and nature of the project has been taken through the preliminary design stages. But as members know, there's a very considerable hurdle in addressing the large funding deficit that is needed to advance the project. And that, of course, is a discussion that will take place, continue to take place, both in the capital working group and indeed in the finance working group. The last point, Councillor Doyle, I'm sorry, I didn't pick up. So I don't know if that's something you wanted an officer comment on or not. today.
I just even wanted to, it was just seemed strange to me that in the period that we had zero numbers of civil partnerships in the district. It seemed very odd to me, John. I'm just wondering maybe if somebody could look into it, because I'd be very surprised if it was zero. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Doyle. We will look into that and just check our records with regard to that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And at this stage, the report has been proposed and seconded, and I'm not seeing any other people looking to indicate to speak. So we'll move on to item 9, which is the Code of Practice on Producing Information, and that's back over to Ellen.
Through you, Chair, this report seeks members' comments and approval in respect of the revised Code of Practice on Producing Information, which is set out in Appendix 1. And obviously, just to remind members that in terms of both our residents and our visitors, there are a variety of needs in terms of accessibility to information and services, and indeed our statutory duty in terms of Section 75 specifically relates to equality of opportunity to council services and information. So the Code of Practice itself is about making sure that all information emanating from the council is accessible as possible as per our equality scheme commitments. So ultimately, as I say, this document is kept under continual review, and it has now been updated to include a section on inclusive language. And that was probably, as is indicated in the report, prompted by guidance on about ethnicity and in terms of as I say, the use of language. The code itself now that we've produced, we hopefully contains the most up-to-date information on best practice to ensure accessibility and inclusivity in written, spoken and technical lines of communication. As you can see, we've reformatted it slightly in the sense of we now have 3 guides, one about information formatting, one about inclusive language and imagery, and the third one about the technical access. We would see, as highlighted in the application sections, that, as I say, ultimately, this Code of Practice is about ensuring people are treated with an inclusive and respectful approach, and that this should have positive benefits for people of different ages, people who have disabilities, different ethnic minority backgrounds, gender, marital status, religious belief and sexual orientation. And the recommendation in front of members today is that, subject to your comments, that the revised Code of Practice on Producing Information is approved. Thank you, members.
Councillor Minnick.
Thank you, Chair, and just like to say thank you to Ellen for bringing this paper, and I just to propose adoption of it formally. Thank you.
Councillor Heaney.
Just indicating that I'm happy to second that.
And is there anyone else that wants to make any comments or speak in relation to that? Happy enough to move on? Perfect. Okay. So that moves us to item 10, which is in reference to Local Democracy Week, which is, again, Ellen.
And through you, Chair, the purpose of this report is to inform members and seek their approval of the proposed programme of events to promote Local Democracy Week 2022 and to encourage members' participation in the actual week event. Local Democracy Week has taken place between the 17th and the 21st of October, and indeed the theme this year is about protecting the environment and local communities take action. The initiative itself is about encouraging young people to voice their opinions, raise the profile of local democracy, get councillors involved with youth, and also it's a commitment within the member development programme. As I say, the recommendation in front of members today is firstly to adopt the proposed programme and approve the costs incurred, which will be funded via the member training budget, and that to encourage all members, where applicable, to get involved in promoting Local Democracy Week. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ellen. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ellen for that report. I know that member services put an awful lot of hard work and they providing opportunities for local councillors to engage with young people around Local Democracy Week. It's always a very enjoyable week, and there's some very, very good events that I have certainly taken part on over my time on council. We will certainly, as a group, be keen to be involved, and if we can get emails out early to get slots filled, and we'll be happy to do it. But we'll also, Chair, like to encourage schools to get involved as well, because whilst, yes, it is pertinent that we encourage local councillors to get involved, it wouldn't be what it is without the participation of local schools, and the more local schools that we can get involved, the more opportunity we have for young people to understand the work of this council and the work of an elected member. So we're happy to support and to propose the paper, and happy to be involved in local democracy whenever it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. And is anybody else willing to or wanting to speak on this item? And I need a seconder for the report as well. Councillor Mooney, happy days. So that's proposed and seconded. Just to sort of concur with Councillor Tierney, last year it was my first year as a councillor, and I took part in Local Democracy Week in St Joseph's and did the panel discussion and that there, and it's so important to be involved with young people. So well done. I'm looking forward to it. Which moves us on to the items that are open for information. I think it had been referenced earlier about getting the update from the Hardship Fund, which is item 11. So I think we'll take that first, and then if anybody else has any items that they want to speak on, let us know. But I'll pass over to Una if you want to give us that wee update just.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members, as you can see in the detail of the report, that whenever we last met towards the end of July, that we wanted to look particularly around the application process and the eligibility criteria, because that was causing some concern. And we also said that we would go back and we would speak again to our local support organisations and to speak to the regional charities. So we've undertaken that, and you can see that within the key issues section that we've given you some of the key points. So by and large, everybody that we spoke to agrees that in order to really target this funding and recognising that it's it's a very valuable intervention, it's relatively small in financial terms, that there needs to be some form of criteria applied, and the one that was most highly regarded was the level of income. But again, whenever we meet on Thursday, we want to explore that in a bit more detail around how that can be checked and how you might be able to supplement or have alternatives to that in order to make sure that you're reaching those most in need. Members, there was a very, very strong indication from our local support organisations that they felt that rather than have a burdensome application process, that we should use trusted partners, and these are organisations such as our advice services who already work with vulnerable people and households in needs, that already do some form of eligibility check, so we wouldn't have to repeat that. And there was also a suggestion that rather than have an open application process, that we should maybe consider a referral. So we want to look at the different aspects of that and what that might mean, particularly from a rural perspective, and also in terms of making sure that there was good geographical spread in terms of meeting the need that was there. And everybody agreed currently that the biggest priority is energy, and are very keen that we will continue in that vein. So we've got a number of recommendations that we want to present to members on Thursday whenever we reconvene again, and then it will be our intention, if members were happy to put forward proposals or recommendations to full council, that we could put a paper through Health and Community so that it would actually go to full council at the end of this month. So that's the update that we wanted to give for today.
That's great, thank you. Anna, does anybody want to speak on that, or are we happy enough for that update and for it to go to the working group on Thursday? Happy enough. Councillor Doyle, you've indicated you want to speak on item 14?
Yes, please, Chair. There was a discussion around this. I think it might have been in the Good Relations Working Group, or it was one of the other working groups not that long ago, I think before recess, around the governance of some of the organisations that we as members sit on. I was quite surprised to read through this, to note that in many of them, of organisations, particularly in some of the the council and community run organisations, that there's no formal rule effectively for elected members. That actually the recommendation seems to be that we have an informal discussion with centre managers every quarter. I think it was for most of them. Now I have to say that for many of the organisations, even that I was added to as a result of the AGM, even last year, I think the Walled City Partnership, for example, was one of them. I never even had an email from them with regards to meeting up as a board member. There are other organisations. I'm on Dove House, for example. Within 2 days of being added to their board, I had an email from them, invited me to a meeting. I've always had emails in the past from other organisations, but the question has to be asked: if we are using ratepayers' money in particular to support and fund organisations, there has to be an input from council and governance, and it's something that I believe was mentioned, as I say at that working group meeting, that we were going to look into, that there was going to be some form of change to the most of the terms of some of these organisations, where we should have direct input, because even some of the organisations that are listed that we are very involved in as a council, elected members are only on boards in an advisory capacity. I don't necessarily think that kind of hands-off approach is particularly the way to go. So I was wondering if someone might be able to have give an update as to what the situation is with that change of terms, or whatever they want to call it. But just to note that I thought that was particularly interesting. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Thompson, want to speak on the same item, and then.
Yes, Chair. Are you hearing me there?
Yeah.
It's on a similar vein. It's to do with the strategic growth partnerships. I see a number of them. Well, most of them have detailed their membership. I mean, the likes of the Fahan, Foylside, Moore, Sperrin, Strabane, most of them, other than the Waterside one. And it just says membership 20 people, but it doesn't indicate who's who. And I would, as now a representative in the Waterside DEA, I would obviously like to know who's who, and and who represents the Western Trust, the community involved sectors, etc. So that could be maybe looked into to see what the problem happens to be. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Hussey on the same item.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, there's a general point whereby members of council are elected onto these various bodies. They are there, of course, representing the entire council. And sometimes I do have concern about attendance at a lot of these bodies. I know a lot of the bodies are sometimes a bit lax about their meetings and about notifications, etc. But is there any way that council itself would track its own membership and their representation on some of these bodies, and indeed the bodies themselves, as to when they actually meet, etc.? That's point number one. Point number two would be with regard to Visit Derry. And I'm just looking at the objectives. It may be contained in the memorandum and articles of association, I'm not sure. But if I look at the objectives, destination marketing and visitor servicing, increase overnights, visitor spend, and jobs in the tourism economy. Surely at the end of that, it should be saying, because this has been raised on many occasions, it should be saying destination marketing and visitor servicing to the city and entire district, because questions have been asked in the past, as officers know, with regard to the remit of Visit Derry And it's not just a city tourism development and development in general. It's supposed to be servicing the entire district area. So I hope that that's something that could be taken on board and specified within the objectives of that particular body. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. I'm going to pass over to John. He's going to pick up on some of those points. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tierney, you were looking to come on.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. I thought it was very useful. And I think listening to some of the comments from colleagues, it will do them no harm to actually read it and understand what the role of an elected member on an external body actually is. It is an advisory piece of work, and you're there on behalf of the entire council. But if you find that there's any issues, you're more than within your rights to either raise them at committee or raise them at full council. In relation to the Councillor Doyle's point around the council-owned community-managed community centres, I recall a number of years ago when a lot of those centres were moving from council-owned, council-managed to council-owned, community-managed, that it was proving a wee bit difficult. So there was then the setting up of the wider community centre working group, where issues can be discussed at that point. But as I understand it, particularly on the ones that within my own DA, those advisory panels still exist. They may not exist on paper, but the managers of those centres are still tapping in to see particularly what the local elected representatives think of the way forward, because whilst they may be council owned and community managed, those centres need support from elected representatives when going about their daily business, and the elected representatives equally need support of the community centres and the community organisations when going about their work. So I very much see it as a partnership approach, and I think the setting up of the wider community centre working group was something positive, because it brought all of those issues and under the one working group where they could all be discussed across the council district. Maybe others have a different view on it, but that's certainly my experience of how it was rolled out. But thanks for the document. I found it quite useful, and hopefully we'll see. As Alderman Hussey has referenced, attendance can be quite of a thing, and maybe we'll see better attendance once people understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. John, that's over to you now.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all members for their comments. I suppose one of the major comments that was made there by Councillor Doyle with regard to the level of representation or participation by members onto the various groups. What I would say is what we have in front of us today is kind of a first step, where we brought all this together for the first time for members to review, so that we have all of this information in front of us. Many of the organisations, the representation on the organisations, the nature of the representation, the numbers, the composition have evolved over the years, and some of them are very different to others. They would have been agreed at the time they were set up. There is always opportunity to review those to consider whether it's still appropriate or not. There are pros and cons for being involved in an advisory capacity or being involved in a decision-making capacity, and those are issues which members would have to take counsel on in terms of any changes to those. What I would say is probably too broad an issue to deal with today with a sort of a broad brush approach to it. But if there are particular organisations or particular classifications or groupings of organisations that members wish us to bring forward more detailed consideration of existing membership arrangements for future consideration, then we'd be very happy to do so. With regard to the points raised by Alderman Devaney and Hussey, we will, of course, look into those and advise accordingly. And I think really from myself, Chair, that I hope addresses the points raised. That the other points were comments.
enough of that. And there's no one else that's indicated in speaking. Councillor Farrell, apologies, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. It's item 15, the Housing Council update. So it's nothing specifically about the Housing Council update, but at this meeting last year, September 21, we had a delegation from the Housing Executive led by Grania Long, the Chief Executive, where we had a really wide-ranging discussion about maintenance issues, but most importantly for us, it was about housing supply. And I note the housing bulletin that was released last week showed that there's 5,500 applicants from across this city and district on the social housing waiting list, and over 4,000 of them are in housing stress. And that hasn't changed since last year. And, you know, what I had said to Grania Long was, we're not building enough houses. And that hasn't changed. And it might be a figure on a page, but the 5,500, that's 5,500 families or individuals where finding a home that is suitable, finding a home that is affordable, finding a home that is not overcrowded, you know, where they're not being forced to private rent, they're not being forced to live with friends and family members until they find somewhere permanent. That's the number one issue for 5,500 families across this city and district. So there's not enough houses being built. And that's a major, major issue for thousands of people across this city and district. So my question is, are we going to have a similar delegation this year from the Housing Executive, specifically about the Social Housing Development Programme? And if so, has it been scheduled yet? Thank you.
Chair, I'm just advised by Rachel that it is scheduled for next month's Governance Committee. The Housing Executive will be here, and we will specifically refer the comments today from yourself and any other members in advance to the Housing Executive.
Alderman Hussey on the same item.
Thank you. I can concur with the issue of housing provision. And I think within that housing provision, there's a strong need to ensure that the provision matches the actual need. Myself and Alderman Kerrigan were meeting with a local residents association just last night, and one of the issues that did be mentioned was the fact of maybe one person living in a house with 3 spare bedrooms, another person with 2 spare bedrooms, somebody else with 2 spare bedrooms, all within one small estate. So the actual nature of the accommodation being provided has to match the actual needs of people on the ground, you know, otherwise we begin to create our own difficulties when it comes to matching people with their requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. And as John has referenced, that we look forward to that delegation coming under this committee next month. So that closes off the open for information section. I would need a proposer and seconder for us to move on to confidential. Councillor Farrell, Councillor Mooney, thank you.
Chair, I had just indicated to speak there.
Apologies, sorry, Patricia, I didn't see it in the chat there. Just moved on. Go ahead.
I'm not part of this committee, but thanks very much, Chair, for allowing me to come in. We do have a representative on the Housing Council, and you know, the bulletin that we get, it's just headings of the topics that were discussed. There's no real information on those headings, and given the level of housing stress, especially within our council district, I think it would be beneficial if the member, I just forget who it is now at the moment, if they would share the information that they're getting, because they are there on behalf of this council. So I do think that the information that they get, the full, we should also get it as well.
Okay, it's up to Alderman Breslin if he wants to bring that information back to even this committee, that would be great.
That's fine with me.
Happy days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. So we've had proposal from Councillor Farrell and seconded by Councillor Mooney for